2025, where he has addressed a number of issues regarding the economy and the state of the country, some of which we are verifying and checking against existing data for fact checks, which some of which we are going to be sharing in just a bit. He has spoken about matters to do with health. You could see the emphasis on some of his legacy projects, and agenda. This is pretty much what he's scoring himself when it comes to how he has performed vis-a-vis his agenda and the promises that he had when he was being voted into office. We are also going to be looking at how these commitments and statements, where when you think about it in regard to the comparative dynamic from last year's address, where he had made a number of commitments to see whether he has achieved or whether we have the same, or whether there are any things that have changed in regards to has he changed any kind of pointers in regards to different sectors. And just to point out, based on some of his pronouncements, the president claimed that at independence, there was no material difference in the development indicators between Kenya and Asian tigers. And when we have done our research, and this is alongside the Institute of Economic Affairs, we have found that literacy rates in Singapore, Taiwan, and Malaysia in 1965 was 75, 78, and 76 respectively, while Kenya's was below 40%. And so this means that this claim is untrue, and this is based on data from the World Bank indicators, World Development Indicators by the World Bank. So just we're beginning our fact check right now. It has hired 76,000 more teachers, and when we search in the Economic Survey of 2025, we find this to be true. We also have claims that sugar imports falling by 70%, and imports are still higher than what it was in 2022. So that means that claim is untrue, and this is off the Economic Survey of 2025, specifically page 197. The president has also said that 500,000 students was sponsored by HELB, and for 2024 it is true, and it is even higher for 2025, according to the Economic Survey of 2025. So he is right, and the 2025 numbers are at about 723,000, which means that he is true. But there's a catch here, just a rider to that, is that the average subsidy per student is lower. So that has enabled the government to sponsor more students when it comes to the HELB, through HELB. Now, we also have other aspects that we're looking at in regards to just a fact check, like in the health space. In the health space, there has been the claim that the government is modernizing hospital equipment by replacing old models. And the finding is that the Ministry of Health has indeed embarked on upgrading hospital equipment in county and national hospitals, which includes ICT scanners, dialysis machines, and laboratory diagnostic tools. And this is from the Ministry of Health website, so this is true. Yes, on your screen, that this is the first fact check that I read out earlier on, that the president claimed that there is no material difference in development between Kenya and the Asian tigers in 1963. The finding, when we get into the data, is that literacy rates. When you look at the literacy rates, first of all, in Singapore, it was 75%, Taiwan, 78%, and Malaysia, 76%, and Kenya's was below 40%. And so this shows that in regards to him saying there was no material difference at independence, 1963, it means that this is untrue. This is false. Then he also said at independence, rather on the same point of saying that there's no material difference in development indicators between Kenya and the Asian tigers, the other parameter we've looked at is life expectancy. Now, for some countries, it was between 61 to 67 years, while in Kenya, it was less than 50 years. And the source of this is the World Development Indicators by the World Bank. And so this pretty much you're saying is the president is not truthfully stating this. Kenya was far behind on many human indicators. So it cannot be a blanket matter of saying that there's no material difference on the same. Now, we also have another aspect of fact check. As I was saying, when it comes to health, he has said that the government has overhauled KEMSA. And when we look into the records, we see that KEMSA was indeed restructured in 2024. And so the verdict here is that this is true. Like I said, he said they have hired 76,000 more teachers. And according to the economic survey of 2025, excuse me, this statement is credible. We say that it is true. Then we have 2.3 million indigents paid for premiums and can access healthcare. Premiums were paid for these individuals, for these indigents. Indigents are people who can barely afford to even buy the basic goods and services in the home. And so 2.3 million, according to the president, had their premiums paid and can access healthcare. The finding here is that the access to financing for premiums has been through debt for persons in informal sector. Now, the SHA platform requires you to pay annually, but connects you to Hustler Fund, so you may borrow. Payments are already made annually as opposed to monthly for formally employed. And this is the source of this is user experiences from using the SHA platform. And the verdict here is that it is partially true because funding is on debt basis. And this is a finding that we have found in partnership with Kelin. So we're having different partnerships with industry experts who are in the business of data and research. And so this is why we are able to give you this data as is. Again, I think I had picked on as well the claim of how many students have been sponsored by HELB. That's the Higher Education Loans Board. He said that there were 500,000, and the finding is that it is true for 2024, even higher for 2025, which is at around 723,000. But the point to note here, the rider here, is that the average subsidy per student is lower. So that means even if you had, for instance, the same number, same amount of money, then you would be able to sponsor more people because you're giving each of them less in terms of subsidy. Now, aside from that, we also have questions that we're going to be looking into when it comes to matters of like the sugar imports, like I'd said earlier, as well as the national maize harvests. He says that the national maize harvests have risen from 44 million bags in 2022 to 67 in 2024, setting the stage for historic harvest of 70 million bags this year. And that is paragraph 47 of his speech. I'm just getting the specific details together. And so the finding on the KNBS, that's the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, that the data shows it is 44.7 million bags. And that is from the economic survey of 2025. If you want to walk with us, specifically, you can actually go to the KNBS survey, economic survey on page 193. Then we also have more and more updates. So the claim is that 27 million Kenyans are registered in SHA, more than triple the number reached by NHIF, with over 10,000 health facilities signed up. The finding, and we look into the findings that have been shared based on what MOH has said and also what we've reported over time, and we'll be telling you the verdict of the same. And we keep looking into this, and we'll be getting the responses from different leaders who are at Parliament, who are the primary audience, so to speak, in terms of physical audience, when the President was delivering his State of the Nation address before Parliament, in the National Assembly chamber specifically. And Ibrahim Karanja is at Parliament and is going to be joining us in not too long to also just allow us to get a sense of what the MPs said. And interesting thing that happened in Bunge, or in Parliament, is that at a point when the President was making his address, we had MPs just interrupting his speech, and there were shouts of two-term. And the President acknowledged them. He acknowledged the two-term chants, and then he went on with his address. And so this is, again, we see the politics playing out, the current politics of the day between 2-term and 1-term, and this would be pretty much an indication of the MPs who are, shouting 2-term, pointing to the president's address, showing that he is delivering and hence deserves a second term in power, against the countering narrative of 1-term, where we have the united opposition as well as other Kenyans also saying that the president should only serve 1 term. And so we are keeping on monitoring the different dynamics of these statements that the president made, and so we will just keep looking at them. Once again, just for the benefit of those who may have just joined us not too long ago, we have various fact-check dynamics in regards to what the president said, and one of them is that there's no significant material difference in development indicators between Kenya and the Asian tigers in 1963. That's at independence, and the finding is that, one, on literacy, when we talk about the Asian tigers, we have Singapore had 75% literacy, Taiwan 78%, Malaysia 76%, and Kenya was below 40%. And this shows that this cannot be considered to be not be a material difference. And so this claim by the president we find to be untrue. And this data is based on the World Bank data. Now, we also have a claim that there's no difference in development indicator. It's a second layer to the same one between Kenya and the Asian tigers in 1963. And the finding here is that life expectancy for many countries is between 61 to 67 years, and Kenya's was less than 50 years old, and that was again at independence 1963. Again, the source here is the World Bank, and so we say that the verdict here is that this is false or untrue. Now, we also have more data that we are looking into and verifying based on the president's address, and the claim here is that the government is modernizing hospital equipment by replacing old models. We're finding is that MOH has been upgrading hospital equipment in county and national hospitals. The source here is the Ministry of Health. So the verdict here is that it is true. And so we have that as a true statement based on the data that has already been uploaded by the Ministry of Health. And aside from that, it is also something that we could verify by looking at the actual developments in the different hospitals, because we could see that there are many times that even we have covered cases of where we have launches or just rollout of different equipment or otherwise in the medical space in the hospitals, both county and national government hospitals. But that does not, again, negate the fact that there are other significant concerns around the same and around the healthcare system. Now, aside from that, we will keep looking into not only health and the different economy dynamics that I have pointed out. When we talk about the GDP claim, we are going to be looking into the size of the GDP. We are going to be looking at these different pronouncements by the president regarding what exactly the size of the GDP is. Another thing that we are checking is that the government has overhauled KEMSA, and the finding is that KEMSA was indeed restructured in 2024, and the source is KEMSA, that's kemsa.go.ke. So the verdict on this is true, that we have seen the government overhauling KEMSA, and now we are monitoring to see how effective the overhaul activities have been so far, about a year on, because this overhaul was done in 2024, and we keep looking. And just to call to memory is that KEMSA was at the heart of some of the hugest scandals and concerns in the country, even going back to 2020, 2021, when we had the COVID millionaires scandal, which to date, for the record again, we have seen nobody being taken to prison for the same, much as there had been commitments even from the previous administration. President Uhuru Kenyatta once announced that the DPP had 21 days to make public his findings, and let's just say it seems it's not 21 days, and the then DPP is now the director of the National Intelligence Service, and a lot of other bodies and units had gone into investigations, including the National Assembly, with a whole report to boot. But we are still here having COVID-19 millionaires being just an expose done here, the Nation Media Group, and concerns that were raised in different places. Now, another fact check we have is that the president says that we have hired 76,000 more teachers. the finding here is true according to the economic survey of 2025. So this is a figure that he has stated, which we find to be true, saying that we have hired 76,000 more teachers, which is meant to address the concern about the teacher to pupil or teacher to learner ratio in the country, which is below what is meant to be ideal, which then takes a toll on the quality of education that is offered in the country, especially in public schools where we have the heaviest burden in regards to the number of learners that are there who are relying on the teachers who the government is hiring. And so this is a true statement that the government has hired 76,000 more teachers in looking to ease that burden when it comes to the number of learners, not pupils, learners who are under the watch of an individual teacher, because you can imagine there are schools where we have over 100 pupils in one class being attended to by one teacher. So you can imagine if a child, someone in that class has a specific concern, for them to actually get some assistance that is unique and specific to their situation, it becomes really difficult. So this again hits the quality of education, and you can imagine these are children who are competing or in similar examinations, may put it that way, with children who have teacher to pupil or student rate that is much better than the ideal in private facilities, for instance. So you find there's some schools that will have a teacher to student ratio of 1 to 5, for instance. So you can imagine how convenient and how effective that could be in an ideal case of the learners getting the benefit of having some quality education. So by the time they get into the workspace or just get into different schooling spaces, it becomes an advantage to them. Now, another fact check here is that HELB has sponsored 500,000 students. The finding is that the 2025 numbers are at about 723,000. And so this is according to Economic Survey of 2025, which means it is true. But like we've put there a note, a rider, is that the average subsidy per student is lower, which means that even, for instance, if we had the same amount of money to be dished out by HELB, but if you have a lower subsidy per student, it means then the number of students who will benefit from HELB is going to increase. And so that is a point to note, that when we say that HELB has supported or sponsored more students than it did before, so that claim by the president we have found to be true based on the findings of the Economic Survey of 2025. And excuse me, and so this again speaks to education, which the president also spoke to having. He said that the education sector has received a lot more funding in the last budget, or in the current budget that we are in now, a budget cycle we are in now, compared to when he ascended to office. And so the question here becomes, are we seeing the fruit of this additional investment? Are we seeing, moving from, call it 400 and something billion to over 700 billion shillings? If that is the case, for instance, then the question is, are we seeing the benefit of that? And how much would be needed to get to an ideal case? We still have, again, despite, when he states that there's a lot more investment, budgetary allocation going to education, we still find that many schools are struggling with what is the capitation situation, where we're having schools which are getting very little money. Then the school heads, are being told, not to chase children out of school, away from school for not having school fees, and they are told to still not charge any school fees. But the head teachers, the school administrators, find themselves in a tricky situation, because at times some have even told us in different reports that we've done here at the Nation Media Group that they are unable to even afford to feed the students or the learners, I might put it that way. So it becomes a conundrum, because they are mandated by the government. The government has put a very clear communique out saying that you should not chase any children back home, or you should not charge the fees. But then the reality on the ground is that we have different, we have a different situation, where we have the school heads and others just having concerns around, can we then afford to do this? And so capitation has been a problem. We've seen the education CS always being in a difficult situation, where he's unable to pretty much respond and give definitive responses which have actually come to pass when it talks about capitation. We've had teachers through various umbrella bodies, be it through their head teachers associations or through unions and otherwise, saying that they're not going to they cannot sustain the education as is. And so even as we talk about higher allocation on the budgets, is the money actually there? We've seen the university lecturers and other staff of universities who are on strike for a number of weeks, and this was pretty much had brought learning in public tertiary institutions to a halt because there was no money, there was no learning. Some schools had already released their students to go back home, and after a deal was struck, the government was struck with money, saying they cannot afford the 7.9 billion shillings that the lecturers were asking for. They asked initially, they wanted to pay it in tranches, about 3 tranches, saying they don't have money again. And then after that, we have the concerns on, the teachers, the lecturers, I should say they're not going to take that. And so eventually a deal was struck that there's going to be payment in 2 tranches of 50% each, and the first one is meant to be done anytime within the next few weeks. Should be done. And the union said if this is not honored, they will be back to the streets, protesting and out of the classrooms or lecture halls, if you may. And so again, there's additional allocation of resources, allocation of the resources to education, but we're still seeing a lot of challenges regarding funding gaps and inability for the sector players to actually effect quality education for Kenya's learners in the whole situation. We're also going to be looking at what the president talked about, some debt and matters when it comes to SHA, as well as also looking at there's an aspect of universal health coverage. How well on, how far into the journey are we when you talk about SHA, for instance, and number of people who are able to be onboarded? Are they getting quality health services? We're also looking at quality health services, access to the same. We saw yesterday the Council of Governors dealt a blow to the whole social health insurance plan and agenda, where they said that it's simply not working for them and for their people, we put it that way. And so they are giving an ultimatum. So it becomes a cyclic kind of situation where you have the alarm being raised, there are crisis talks, we have press briefings. And so at the bottom of it, the question that Kenyans are asking is why? Because they are paying their taxes. Then there's what is the elephant, not just in the room, but even on the alleys, corruption. Is the government able to curb corruption so that we can, curb corruption just to enable the country to not lose so much so that these other critical functions are actually financed? So let's get to hear what the different leaders and legislators and other leaders, because not only legislators were at the National Assembly chambers, in Parliament who are there. So we are keen to know what they have to say, their feelings about this. Ibrahim Karanja has been monitoring and is at Parliament, where he's standing by to give us an update as he speaks to those leaders. Ibrahim, we even had chance of 2-term in Parliament during the address. I don't know, is it that we were happy to, we're looking to see whether all the legislators we will speak to are on board that agenda of 2-term, happy with what the president said, and whether they feel that what he has said is an actual picture of the state of the nation? Ibrahim.
Well done. Indeed, before we went on air, we mentioned that this is a time that President William Ruto will be coming to address a bicameral parliament that is largely supporting him. I explained earlier that whereas in 2022, 2023 and 2024 there were factions, political differences, this time the president was coming to a somewhat more united house. I've got no scientific survey done, but roughly from my viewing, 70–80% of parliamentarians in support of him, and that is why we saw that moment of 2-term from members of parliament. But we are trying to get reactions from the members here and also some of the top government officials who accompanied the president to parliament. And standing not too far from me, before I speak to members of parliament, is the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, the Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen. Waziri, thank you very much. You accompanied the president here, and the president today has been laying a blueprint of how to move the country to a first world. This is what he's been speaking about in the past couple of days, but today practically citing everything that needs to be done. I'll be speaking to members of parliament because at some point they even started saying two-term in the chambers. But you sit in the cabinet and you'll be expected to see this come into fruition. What is your immediate step, especially as CS for Interior, but also as, with your colleagues in the cabinet, to ensure that we get to what the president has said?
I think the president summarized everything that we have. For a long time, we have settled for the less when our potential is higher. And we need to move from potential to reality. And there is no country in the world that has developed without massive infrastructural investment, whether it is water infrastructure, road infrastructure, transport infrastructure. Like the president explained, if we have to move from a third world country, a first world country, first it starts by feeding yourself. And for you to feed your food, to give your people food security, to feed yourself, you must invest in proper water, proper irrigation. You must also reduce capital flight and, the draining of resources abroad by ensuring that you do not import a lot of food. 500 billion is too much money for you to spend in 1 year importing food and something that you can be able to grow. Once you do that, you can be able to attract more investments. Number two is that I don't think many Kenyans appreciate, and I want to say this as a former minister for transport and for roads, the single biggest investment in the Republic of Kenya that will bring massive resources to our country, bringing dollars of money to the country, bringing employment to Kenya, is the Rironi Summit Road. Considering that we are going to spend almost 2 billion shillings, 200 billion Kenya shillings by the investors, and it's not taxpayers' money, is something really mind-boggling. In fact, I think the communication on this issue needs to continue being emphasized, that at a one go, by constructing 170 kilometers of road, we are attracting 200 billion shillings to our country, which means we have more contractors working, we have more people employed, we have more dollars being kept in our country. And I want to say that the ambition that the president has enumerated, including investment in energy, investment in water, is the future of Kenya. And the future of Kenya, the security of the people of Kenya, is in greater investment. Remember that we have so many young people. Our median age is 19 years. And it's important for us to always think ahead in terms of investments, in terms of employment, in terms of growing the economy, because if we don't do that, it's a threat to our national security. So our national security does not depend on buying guns and bullets and so forth. It depends on proper and strategic investments in the country.
Waziri, before I speak to members of parliament, there's this very important question which I want to ask you. The president has spoken about two very important funds, the infrastructure fund and the sovereign wealth fund. And when Kenyans are hearing about this, and it's about funding the projects that the president envisions, the other question that a layman would ask is, does it mean that I'll have to get more into my pocket to fund government? Is that what it means?
Not at all. If you remember the first part of the conversation, the president has said that past resources that have come from privatization have always been plowed back to normal budget. It ends up paying salaries and recurrent expenditure. And when you sit here and think about, we privatize Kengen, we privatize Kenyari, we privatize the other entities of government, we even telecom, including when we privatize telecommunications, you cannot sit here and say this is the assets we bought out of that investment. So the president is saying that out of the planned privatization project ahead of us, following the passing of the privatization law, which the president said is going to sign tomorrow, is that all those resources, instead of taking them to recurrent expenditure, we can take to infrastructure fund. And inside the infrastructure fund now, it can be used to invest in our assets, the airport, the roads, the water projects. Projects that when you sit down the line, you can be able to tell the people of Kenya that as a result of this privatization, we are able to build dual roads, we are able to build new airports, we are able to build new dams, we are able to build new energy resources, including increasing our electricity. Number two, in the Wealth Sovereign Fund, is to say that, and you know the president located it properly in the law, that intergenerational equity requires that every resources that are earned by Kenyans today must benefit future generations. And he gave the good example of titanium. Now we want to explore more resources, gold and other resources in Kenya. We are saying that out of that resource, there must be a component of that resource that is going to go to Sovereign Wealth Fund that will be replowed, rotated, reinvested, invested in carefully to make sure that it answers more money. And therefore, when the people of Kenya in 50, 60 years wake up and they were told there was titanium in Kenya, there was gold in Kenya, they will comfortably say that this sovereign wealth fund is as a result of the investment we've done before. And he gave the example of Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and among other countries that have thought in terms of the future of their country.
All right, thank you very much, Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen. Thank you for your time. I'll now start to speak to members of Parliament to get to hear their thoughts about the address by President William Ruto. And I'll start by Sirisia Member of Parliament, John Waluke. Thank you very much for joining us on NTV. When the President was addressing today, and he specifically spoke about projects, at some point, members of Parliament unanimously stood and said, two-term. I saw that happen. And now, beyond the blueprint that the President has given, there is now walking the talk to achieve every other ambitious project that is mentioned. What is the place of Parliament in making sure this happens?
No, us is to supervise, to oversight, and we are going to make sure that we oversight, as the President has said. And indeed, it is true that the President has tried in the span of 3 years, compared to other presidents who were there before. President William Ruto has proved, he has worked, and he has shown. He's the first president to push the money from Nairobi to Mashinani. At least when you go to every constituency, there is a project, either electricity, either road, either water, or trying to improve education. At least he has tried. Right. He has really tried. And Kenyans should support President William Ruto. Let us leave everything and this give our country first priority.
Thank you very much. Asante sana na tutazungumza zaidi. That is Sirisia, Member of Parliament, the Honorable John Waluke. But of course, I will be speaking to more members of Parliament. Let me speak to my own Member of Parliament, the Njoro constituency MP, Charity Kathambi. And Mheshimiwa, when the President was speaking today, at some point, and that's a question that I've asked Mheshimiwa Waluke, members of Parliament stood and unanimously said, let's move closer, and even chanted two-term. But there is the issue of this is what is the ambition that the President wants for the country, of moving the country from to a first world country. But the question is, with what we are seeing happening now, because what we are seeing happening now is handouts, politics of issuing money at political podiums. How do we reconcile this, what is happening now, to the ambitious project that the President has?
We have to start in a very honest way in this country, because we must remember where we have come from. We must remember also the kind of manifesto we had as Kenya Kwanza. And with what His Excellency the President has delivered with Kenya Kwanza, I think that's where we should base our communication from. The issues of handout, I don't know what actually it is, but what I know, he has delivered a lot. Today, you yourself being a presenter here today, we are the people who are celebrating the biggest road which is really going to save most part of the Republic of Kenya. That is from Naivasha, Nairobi, all the way to Nakuru, all the way. Very long distance road, meaning what? Our people are going now to have a quick communication and also transportation on matters of even our food produce, which we had a lot of challenges in part, most of us who come from Rift Valley, and myself who come from Njoro constituency. Another thing, we have to tell one another the truth. Myself, yes, I stood and I said two-term, and the way members of Parliament have stood to say two-term. Why am I saying that? I come from Njoro constituency where I requested for a 2 billion road. Right now, the contractors are on the ground. Right now, they have divided themselves in different parts of the constituency. I end a lot of challenge when it comes to the issues of electricity. But today, I have over 75 programs of electricity being connected in my constituency. Right. As I stand here today, why we have also said two-term, it is because this country, we have a lot of challenge when it comes to the matters of the youth. And when the President, among us, the issues he talked about, it is also the TVETs, which are really making our youth to be busy, and their talents and the skills are really, they have been put as a priority. And another thing which also was very important, it is the matters of the food and also the issues of touching the farmers on the ground, and which has been a challenge. Therefore, today, we really appreciate, and we are actually saying it during the day, that two-term president is served for today.
Thank you very much. Charity Kathambi is a member of parliament for Njoro, my own member of parliament. I earlier spoke to Tabitha Mutinda before the president came here, and there's a question that I'm not finding an answer to. President William Ruto has laid out a very proper blueprint on making the country a first world country. But what he's spoken about and what is happening today cannot be reconciled. What we are seeing today is dishing out money in terms of handouts and in terms of empowerment and such. How do you reconcile where we are today, the reality of the day, with the wishes and the desires of President Ruto?
Let me say that you see what you want to see. If you want to see empowerment, then that's what you're going to see. And I would need you try and focus, as per our Constitution 132 indicates that the president needs to do the address. He's been diligent and he's been always doing it. He's been able to focus on specific areas that are going to bring our country to a first world country level. And that is what he has laid down. That is what he has focused on. Case example, when you look at the infrastructure fund, that when you asked me earlier, what do you anticipate? I anticipated infrastructure fund discussion. This infrastructure fund definitely looks at ensuring that our infrastructure, especially the roads, both new roads and any pending roads, will be brought to the level and the standard that they need to be. The issue of the dams. The issue of the dams play a very critical role. That is the issue of agriculture sector that the president is very passionate about and said that is the lifeline of this country. He's talked about the issue of the coffee sector, the issue of the tea sector. Those are areas that the president has really emphasized on. Look at the issue of the housing. He has said his opponents kept on seeing what they wanted to see, the same way people are trying to see the empowerment programs only, not looking at the reality of the housing today. People are able to now to sleep in those particular houses. More projects are still coming up. The digital infrastructure, the fiber optics that the president has mentioned, over 1,500 digital hubs that we have today. I mean, a big milestone, because we want to transform this country into our digital service delivery by both the government and the private sector. Right. He's talked about the issues of the youth, the Nyota program, the Hustler Fund program. These are things that he promised and he's been able to actualize. So can we narrow our discussion to the address and like to what we've been doing on the ground?
What I'm doing basically is doing a comparison of the reality on the ground and what we need to achieve. But thank you very much, Senator. We'll be speaking to you more about this particular address by the president. But if you allow me to perhaps wind it down with two last members of parliament or three last members of parliament, I would start with the chairperson of the Justice and Human Rights Committee of the Senate, and that is Bomet's Senator Hilary Sigei, who is speaking to my member of parliament. I invite you to join us live on NTV because there are critical issues which we need to discuss. And this is owing to what the president has spoken about, the blueprint he has laid towards achieving first world status as a country. And the question I've been asking the other members of parliament is, let's do a comparison. What is happening today, the reality on the ground now, vis-a-vis the ambitions by the president? What we are seeing are leaders, you have actually of the UDA party, moving around the country, dishing out money through empowerment, dishing out money through various other programs. How do we reconcile this to the big reality, the grand dream of being a first world country? Yes, a very good speech on paper, but there is also walking the talk.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to disagree with this use of the term dishing out money to non-programs. One of the reasons as to why there is the conversation around the dishing out of resources is in the context, I believe, of the Nyota program, which is actually not part of what we would say dishing out money. This is a program that has been designed to facilitate the young generation to establish enterprises at a very minimal fee. That is one of the things. The other program, which sort of people might interpret to mean or to look like dishing out money, is the empowerment program. That program, properly appreciated, has been designed, has supported so many people in very many ways. the mama mbogas, the gentlemen who are border riders, are most of the people who've benefited. And the reason why that was happening is because bottom-up economic model was one of the campaign programs by the Kenya Kwanza government. And therefore, they needed to reach out to them. If you have not been able to raise some capital for purposes of running a business, then this is the program that was facilitating them. That is why I just felt like I needed to dissuade that mindset. However, what you have said is very important, and your question is very important. How do we walk the talk? When the president acknowledged the fact that we are actually on a road to prosperity, he was trying to define the roadmap. And the roadmap, he made it in 4 key points. One, the energy sector, where he said, we cannot say we are going to develop, we are going to be industrial nation without energy. The 2,500 megawatts that we are generating is insufficient to power, leave alone even lighting, small industries. And it came out very well that the only other way we can do that is to enhance production of energy. Secondly, of course, he talked about education, which is one of the bottom-up agenda models that we had in terms of reform the sector, reform the funding model, and enhance the support programs to institutions. That is exactly what's going on. Though it is still work in progress, it is fully acknowledged. It is a journey to prosperity. The other item, which I really like, is the fact that he said, let us also distinguish between lack of rain and lack of water. The conversation around agriculture can only happen when there is water. There is water when there is a program like the dams, which he talked about, like the initiation by the government, and very intentional to make sure that we channel resources into it. And lastly, the infrastructure, the roads, the airspace, which is one of the major challenges that we have. I and you travel almost every weekend. I use Narok, Maimayu, Bomet Road. A good number of our colleagues also use Nairobi, Nakuru, Nairobi, Naivasha, Nakuru Road. And the infrastructure cannot be overemphasized. If we improve it, the rest of us will benefit. The challenge is what he said. How do we get there? And that is why he was talking about, let us privatize non-strategic government institutions and make sure we develop the 2 funds, infrastructure fund and sovereign wealth fund. That way we are protecting the future, we are creating money that will attract private investors to also journey together with the government to achieve this reality. And I hope it is possible.
Senator, allow me to ask you this very important question. When members of parliament listening to a presidential address even interrupt and chant 2-term within that particular address, these are representative of the people. These are people who are supposed to carry out oversight of President Ruto's government. Is it not a risky place to be in as a country?
It is not, because the excitement of the members of parliament to commend the president and say 2-term is an appreciation of what the president was enumerating. You see, when you are given the story of how to arrive to the place that you want to be, that natural excitement is there. And the 2-term conversation is not a big thing. Some of them actually were saying long-term. A majority of them said 2-term, some said long-term. Why? Because they are invited to appreciate the plan by the president on how to achieve the road to prosperity, to take Kenya from developing to a first world country. It doesn't really affect. And
many would say we would have wished to see members of parliament do this on political podiums, but not on the floor of the house.
But you know, parliament is a place of politics. This is a place where we do policies, and when policies that the president is talking about is speaking to your idea and the idea that you desire your people to have, you appreciate it. And the option is you either applaud by thumping your feet, or, as they said, 2-term and long-term.
2-term is not allowed in parliament. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dan, we really need to wind up this conversation, but if you allow me just a second, because we haven't heard from a member of parliament from the ODM party, especially after the address. Allow me to speak to the GEM member of parliament, Elisha Odhiambo. And this last question, which I've asked Senator Sigei, members of parliament have given us quite a spectacle today. The president is addressing, and on the floor of the house, members of parliament interrupted to say 2-term. These are representatives of the people who are supposed to oversight this very regime. Many would have expected that this is something that would have happened on a political podium, not in Parliament. How fast do you react? And are you amongst those who said two-term?
I think what is important is that members were excited and satisfied with what the president mentioned, especially the bypasses going through different communities. For me, the bypass from Rironi, Mau Summit, Kericho, Kisumu, Busia, and passing through Game. For me, that's a score. And secondly, the president mentioned, other than doing those roads, he mentioned where he's going to get the fund. Sovereign bond and infrastructure bond. Infrastructure bond has more traction. What I urge Mbadi, the CS, to do is to a little bit adjust the interest, because he sort of brought the interest down. So if you adjust the interest, we create traction for many Kenyans, many international investors to come and invest. But the infrastructure bond is better than having a house. Because a house, you go end of the month, the tenant must pay. If they don't pay, then you have a haggle. But infrastructure bond, there's no conversation with the tenant. The bank transfers money direct to your account. There's no story about it. So I think the president has given insight on what is happening, insight on what he wants to do, and to confirm to Kenyans, he's on the right path. He has acknowledged that the economy is growing, is stable, but again said that we are not there yet. It means he acknowledges the challenges Kenyans are facing. Finally, he said the teachers will be employed. I mentioned something about PNP teachers in the morning, but this is what I meant. I meant that the PNP teachers should now, they're given 2 years. Nobody is having that conversation. As members of parliament, we must have a conversation about it. One, give 5 years, then argue for pension and permanent terms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, later we'll be discussing about the walking the talk and how to get to this particular vision of the president, the blueprint by the president. Sir, you want to speak to us? You're a member of parliament?
Yes.
Sir, start by telling us how you quickly. Well, we have to wind up this conversation, but I'll start by asking you very briefly, 30 seconds, sir. How do we walk the talk of the ambitious vision the president has read out to the country today, vis-a-vis where we are as a country today? Because it appears the president wants us to go north, but we're walking towards south.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Geoffrey Mulanya, MP Nambale. But first, I must say that I'm happy about the president's speech. It's progressive. If we as members of parliament can perform our role as the oversight role, so that we ensure that the government institutions follow to the latter the promise the president has given the Kenyans today. For instance, the issue on the agriculture irrigation schemes, we ensure that the Minister of Irrigation, they follow up and implement these particular projects. The Minister of Transport, we follow up and ensure that they carry out the dualing of the road that he has mentioned. And the Minister of Energy, we ensure that the issue of energy, we have more energy that can help sustain our domestic use and even industrial use. That's the most important thing, because if the president has the will, but if we don't have ourselves, we don't have commitment to ensure that whatever the president has talked about is enforced, then we cannot move anywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. And of course, we'll be speaking in details about this in the coming days. Allow me right now to wind up and take you to studio. But Dan, you'll remember that part of the things that the president spoke about is also the private-public partnership of some of the projects that we have, including the JKIA, certainly bringing back memories of what was happening last year in this very hallowed house at a time like this, is when the president dropped that ambitious Adani deal that had caused quite the furore in the country. And today, 1 year later, he comes back to this very floor and say, you know what? We will have to get into this private-public partnership initiative to enhance some of our airports, including the JKIA and the other airports that he's mentioned. And he's actually stated that this will start next month. So, of course, one of the things that we will be looking out to see, because remember last time, the concern about Adani was really a concern about non-disclosure by the government, the country feeling that projects or things, important things were being done without the country knowing. So these are some of those things. Remember, there's also that very big news for those suffering from cancer. There is that increase of the cancer package on SHA from 550,000 to 800,000, and very many other projects or very many other things that the President William Ruto has mentioned, things that we will be discussing about in our subsequent bulletins and in the days to come. State of the Nation from Parliament. On behalf of the entire team that was here, my name is Ibrahim Karanja, Michelle Ngele Odhiambo, Jen Gatwiri, Fidel and Viga, and the teams in the studio. We thank you for watching. I take you back to Dan in studio.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim Karanja. And there are some good nuggets from the interviews that you've had there. And I wonder whether Paul will pick up anything about from Senator Sigei saying long term. It could be a whole different conversation. Thank you very much, Ibrahim Karanja, who's been at Parliament grounds from early afternoon into the evening now. And we are going to be taking forward conversations not only on our social media platforms, but also on our bulletins at 7 p.m., 9 p.m., as well as we'll see what we can get from Mashinani at 6:30 p.m. So be sure to stay with us because there's a lot. We are still digging into the fact-checking and just verification of the different pronouncements, and also looking at what was not said. State of the nation without some things being mentioned is quite something telling. My name is Dan Mwangi. Thanks for joining us on this extended broadcast on this day that the President presented the State of the Nation address before Parliament. And we shall be, like I said, keeping you updated across the board on social media, on linear, and everywhere else. On our website as well, ntvkenya.co.ke. Have yourselves a great evening.